Hey guys, what's going on? Shah here, and I am back with now, I think, my third commentary. We're going to be jumping into a Halls 21 for this one. This was from about a week ago, so it was during Inspired and Grievous and Fortified. So this week is now over at the time of recording this video, but this was actually a request from Arcturus in my Discord. Thank you so much for asking for this. So what I've done is I've kind of fast-tracked it. I plan on doing this later down the road. Also, I wasn't like super impressed with this run. I mean, it was a pretty good run. We had 5 minutes left on the timer. But I'm gonna just walk through our routes, some things that we did right, wrong, and just maybe some tips and tricks that might come up. So hopefully you guys enjoy. So one thing that I did have people ask is my like talents and conduits and stuff like that be shown. I'll have my Raider.io link for this key specifically down in the description below, so you can check that out. But it would look something kind of like this. Does this look okay? Maybe. Should I full screen it? Can I zoom in? So this is our comp. We had Guardian Druid, Holy Priest, Frost Mage, Fury Warrior, and Demo Lock. We had 3 people with 4-piece and then 2 people with 2-piece. So we were a little bit more geared than I have in previous commentaries, which you can attribute to why the key might have been successful, because we just had higher damage, which means we were able to get through pulls quicker. Which is always a good thing. And then for talents, I was running Blood Frenzy, Renewal. I was actually running Rest of Infinity, Mass Entangle, Incarn, Earth Warden, and Rend and Tear. All right, so Halls. There are some keys that you can actually. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to be popping Incarn and Ravenous Frenzy right as the key gets slotted. What this means is I can have Incarn and Ravenous Frenzy for the first 30 seconds. By the time you get to the first pull, you probably won't have the most like time left on the buff. You'll probably have a handful of seconds, but it's still better than nothing. There are some keys you don't want to do this in, like Plaguefall and stuff, but for this key, just to get some quick initial threat, I'm going to be using that at the pull. So by the time we get here, I still have like 4 or 5 seconds left on Incarn, and then I'll be chaining it with real Incarn. And then for this pull, so this is a common thing you'll see in like higher end keys, and it's for hero effectiveness. Because there's a lot of groups who will go in and they just kind of pull that first like small group at the start and they'll lust it, which is fine, but shards are scary, especially on fortified weeks and especially on grievous weeks. So that's why you'll see groups do this. Now, how we do that is there's a patrol of a Houndsmaster with 2 Gargans. You have to get a CC on it, something, whether it's a Frozen Trap, a Polymorph, a Hex. You can use Root, but Root's a shorter duration. It's only 30 seconds. But any of those work. This pull will go down pretty quickly. I just realized that I have like the volume bar closing it up. So you can see that this group up in the corner is polyed behind us. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move with the center pack down towards here to just get enough mobs for the Frost Mage to be able to actually get Icy Vein resets. Now, if you notice, the Warrior did die in the first pull. It was just a Dark Thrust from the Dark Blades, or Deadly Thrust. You just have to be careful as a melee player. I, as a tank, typically, like me personally, once I get to a spot, I normally plant, especially during Incarn, I don't move. So the Warrior was just out of position. So we're trying to get that middle pack in. I know there's a lot of groups that actually will just skip around it. They'll either use a Shroud. If they have a Rogue available, they can invis past it, or you can wait for the patrol to move. But for percent-wise, we just decided to grab it. So we just got to kick on that Obliterator. It's coming in now. And you have to be careful of this patrol. If you're comfortable pulling in the Houndsmaster, by all means, but we just used all of our major cooldowns on the last pull with Lust, so I wanted to hold off on the Houndsmaster for a few seconds. Most of the rest of this route is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to go to the Shard on the right-hand side, and then we're going to go back to that last Shard. In a comp like this, you can typically try to focus the Wicked Bolts. Wicked Bolts do a lot of damage to the tank. Most tanks can't mitigate damage that well. Warrior rip threat there. Warriors need to be careful when they're going to use cooldowns, especially if something's being chained in. So what happened there is I chained the pull, but I didn't have Barkskin available for like a mini Incarn, and I didn't have actual Incarn available. And then we missed the stun on the Houndsmaster, which was partly my fault. I had War Stomp and Roar available, but I was a little more concerned with why the Warrior died. So I'm just going to essentially kite those mobs out if they do get enraged and soothe them one at a time. But like I was saying before, Cursive Obliterations aren't as important to kick. Sometimes you want to, especially if you don't have a lot of defensives up or ways to negate the damage, Spell Reflect, or stun it. Wicked Bolts, though, are extremely deadly for tanks. One thing that a mistake that I made here is I tagged the Relic, trying to LOS it here, but because of healing aggro, our priest got aggro and we didn't kick either of the Wicked Bolts and instantly got one shot. So he's going to release. We're going to play fairly defensively here. I'm going to roll, like I have Barkskin rolling, so I feel like I'm pretty safe. I can always LOS if I feel the need to. I have double stack of Frenzied Regen, and I'm not mitigating at all, which is something that I don't know why I'm not. Sorry, I'm like, I didn't really, so before, in previous videos where I do commentaries, I watch the pull through, or I pretty much record it immediately after I run the key. But for this, I kind of just like skimmed through. I was like, okay, we only had 5 deaths. I think it's fine to go through this. I wasn't mitigating there, which is poor decision on my part. We're going to chain in the little Houndsmaster, or not the Houndsmasters, the little Groundskeepers. The reason you'll see me chaining a lot in this dungeon, I mean, there's a few reasons for it, but the main reason is that our Frost Mage consistently wants 5 or more targets because of how Icy Vein works with the Conduit Icy Propulsions. Running with a Frost Mage, you essentially always want X amount of targets to make sure that their cooldowns are always going to be up, because Icy Veins, well, it's not like a Combust or a Tyrant or an Incarn. Icy Veins allows them to do high amount of damage sustained throughout the entire key. You'll also see there's points in the dungeon where we'll let the Collect Sins cast goes off. This goes out from the Sin Collector. We'll let that cast channel because it spawns little ads, which gives her targets to hit to allow her to funnel. So Frost Mages have a very weird, very interesting damage profile where it's like fairly consistent like AoE damage and then very good priority damage with Icy Vein procs. So you'll see us doing a lot of that in this key. Now, you saw over on the left-hand side there is the patrol. We have to be careful of that, not to pull it. So in this on this next pull, when I start kiting from Gargans if I need to, I'm pretty sure I do start kiting in this dungeon, but you have to be aware that, okay, it's like we didn't pull that, it's patrolling around, we just need to make sure that we don't pull it, because 1 will be over %, 2 it'll make the pull a lot harder than it needs to be. So I grabbed the Pat at the bottom of the stairs and dragged them back up here. The reason for that is line of sight allows us to quickly stack them all up. For some reason we had no slows down there, so when I started kiting assuming we had like a blizzard and stuff down, just because when you have a Frost Mage in the group, you typically get used to the fact that things are slow all the time, but we didn't have blizzard down, we didn't have frozen orb, so things weren't slowed. So when I started kiting, I couldn't drop stacks as efficiently. So the goal for this pull is just to keep things nice and stacked. You typically focus the you normally want to focus the Obliterator first for the Wicked Bolt, and then after that you want to focus Houndmaster, followed by Gargans, followed by Darkblade. And then melee just want to make sure that they're not getting hit by the Darkblade, because the Deadly Thrust is pretty much a one-shot in this key. You saw the Warrior get one shot earlier on the very first pull. The way you want to do this is I will always be marked with I typically mark myself with blue. I find that blue is typically easier to see in most keys. And then also our auto marker like blue is one of the last priorities. So the best thing a tank can do though is get consistent with their positioning, because then when you're running with melee like often, they will also then become like used to where you stand. This is a pug though. This is a pug warrior. He wasn't in voice either. We were kind of just going with it. This was a mistake. So what I did here is I targeted the Woe Relic and I tagged it with Moonfire, as you can see this application here. Don't do this, because well, okay, I shouldn't say don't do it, but if you tag Woe Relic, it's going to pull all 4 of the Groundskeepers. If you tag it pulls the relics and 1 Groundskeeper. So I meant to target but when I went to go click on I must have clicked on the Woe nameplate or something like that. And it made this pull a lot bigger than it needed to be, and it gets a little chaotic, because there's a Darkblade, there's Obliterator, there's a Houndsmaster. Houndsmaster is inspired on this week, so we couldn't kick the Wicked Bolts. Luckily, I had Incarn. I was hoping to use Incarn for the Shard pull, but whatever, I decided to I throw it here. And then I think, unfortunately, we end up killing Woe. The problem is because we have so much AoE damage going on, also that I'm targeting it off the bat, It's getting a lot of those white attacks. It's getting and then it's being obliterated by Frozen Orb, by Boon of the Ascended, by obviously Thrash. Tyrant's out now. Tyrant's single target, but with the implosion afterwards. If you do get Woe, for any chance, every 15 seconds he'll do Burst, and Burst is like a burst of AoE damage, obviously. It's a 15-second cooldown, or internal cooldown on the Woe cast, so one melee kick is required. So what I'd recommend doing is either a tank or a DPS can set this target focus in a pull, just so you always have a kick on it. We couldn't kick it because it was inspired. I hope that Blizzard changes this in the future, because this week, obviously at the time of recording, if it's in an inspired pull, you can't kick it, which means you're going to take the damage from it, which kind of set of cooldowns here. Like, we blew Recklessness, we used Tyrant, I used Incarn. So having Woe on this next pull for Thrash on a Grievous week, I think overall is just better. So I'm not Iron Furring. I was not playing well this key. Like, I'm sitting at 100. I'm sitting at Rage Cap, which is not good. And if you're not going to Iron Fur at Rage Cap, at least Maul. Maul's a meme. But if you're taking a lot of magical damage and or you're not taking a lot of physical damage, Iron Fur typically isn't like the greatest thing to have up, so you can spend it on Maul for a little extra damage. It's just Maul is really underwhelming as an ability. So this pull, it's just another shard pull. It has the same thing. It has a collector and it has 2 obliterators in it. I typically like to prioritize one of the obliterators in this pull because the Wicked Bolts hurt the tank a lot. Collect Sins is like a fine cast. They do the Sin Collector does put out a really, really nasty dot, but as long as you have the Curse Dispels covered, the healer can then focus on dispelling that from the collector, and Collect Sins is just going to be funnel for the mage or for any other class that requires funnel to do damage. I'm trying to think what other classes do funnel. Like Rogue, Sub-Rogue is a good example. If you really want the shard to die quickly, you can let Collect Sins go off, which means they can just basically eviscerate spam, and just it melts targets, especially with their 4-piece now. Rogues are nutty. I did a 22 Plaguefall this, I think right before this or right after this, we did a 22 Plaguefall, and Rogues are just stupid. If you can find a good Rogue, I recommend running with one, especially if they play sub. If they play any other spec, don't bring them. Just sub is nutty. This was also, just keep in mind, this video is coming out after the Guardian Druid set's been nerfed. It was about a 15% damage nerf to the set. The drop-off damage isn't as big as I thought it was going to be. And most pulls, when it's like this, or if it's like, 5 or 6 targets, you don't notice it as much. You really notice it on very, very, very large pulls. Like, I was doing a Soleil's Gambit this week. This is the week after this week, so it's a tyrannical week. I did a large pull in Gambit, like 3 or 4 Murloc packs, and I didn't even like get to 100k DPS or 150k. Where this previous week on Fortified, I think 208k was the most I peaked for, not running Legacy. So I think if I ran Legacy of the Sleeper, I could do a lot more damage. But I just don't like the Lego because it leaves you very vulnerable outside of Incarn. So Warrior did get hit by a deadly thrust. Melee, just don't send on the tank in this dungeon. It's always a bad idea. Now I get it if like your tank's being a spaz and he's like running around in circles, or you play with a Demon Hunter. But if you notice my positioning, I'm always facing away from the group. I always try to slowly back up as I tank, because what this does is it inches mobs towards you, because the way that the AI works is that they register that you're close enough to get in melee range, but you're not necessarily far enough away to, cast at. So sometimes it'll cause, caster mobs to kind of inch forward. It'll cause melee mobs to like not swing their auto right away. So you can find these like small little windows where you take less damage as you slowly back up, and that's what I'm doing here. It's also helping me drop the bleed a little bit more efficiently. It's a little nuance that you have to get used to as a tank. I end up hopping Survival Instincts here because I'm just scared. I don't really have anything else up, but it's just a really nice thing to do. It's called nudging, is I think the technical term for it. But anyways, if you're a melee player or if you're a tank, just be aware, like, you need to understand that your positioning will affect how DPS are able to play. So double Stoneborn here. This is standard. I think I did a video on this. I'll link it up here. So I'll link it up in like. So what we're doing is we're grabbing double Stoneborn. We technically have enough percent to finish the key without going over, but what I'm doing here is I'm just essentially I'm making sure that we are going to be able to have the right percent. Plus, we're going to get funnel onto Halkias. So that's the reason why we're grabbing all these groundskeepers. Plus, I want to pad my meters. This was Monday night when we did this key. So I knew the nerf was coming. So I was like, this is my last chance to just fucking zug. So this boss, I did a boss guide on this a while ago, talking about how to properly tank position. Bears specifically, during Incarn, especially with that extra funnel to get bigger thrash shields, I'm going to stand in this pool for the first part of the fight. I have a lot of majors up. I have Incarn still rolling. And this the glass shards, I don't think the damage stacks when the pools are stacked. So you can safely just stand here. The only damage you'll take is from the actual slam. When he gets so close to 100%, you move him a little bit out towards the center of the room. This gives your melee room to, like melee and range room to stand. I'm also going to grab this third Stoneborn to bring it in. This strategy is seen more on tyrannical weeks. It's just, we felt comfortable with the rest of the trash and didn't feel like we needed any trash pull. The extra like 10% DR. So I'm going to pull it in here for extra damage. So bears have a unique way to, talking about funneling, bears have a very unique funneling system. When there are small mobs, so in this dungeon, for example, like things like collect sins, they don't do a lot of, the only concern with collect sins is like aggro. We're very messy here with these shards, by the way. But the boss fight remains the same. It's just the same thing. Like when he gets to close to 100 energy, just move him away. Give melee enough room where there's a gap so they can move in around the boss while staying in melee range, essentially. But back to collect sins. The collect sin mobs don't do enough damage to you to even come close to breaking a thrash shield. So what it does is it gives you additional healing on the more, potent abilities in that pull. So things like the wicked bolts and the thrashes from the shards. And in that pull, the groundskeepers, same thing. Very, very small, insignificant mobs that typically don't auto you fast enough for it to actually like, it'll eat through Earth Wardens pretty quickly, but the auto attack damage is slow enough where you're able to get off more thrashes during Barkskin and during Incarn to give you bigger absorbs. So you have, again, that mitigation for, boss fights. So on that boss, for example, but also on different shard pulls. So pulling in groundskeepers, letting collect sins go off is really good for obviously funnel DPS, but for a tank who's healing based off of damage absorption, it's really good to pull in very minor targets like that. So what you just saw there, I actually want to like flex on this a little bit. So the one thing that Echelon does is he knocks the player who opens the door back. What is annoying about this is that if you get knocked back all the way to the start of the room, so you normally get knocked, I probably get knocked back to where like our priest is in this lower corner. A warrior's going to charge in, hit this guy, rip aggro, get meleeed, and die. I've seen this happen countless times in pugs. I've seen this happen in even like runs like this where I'm with mostly like guildies or a push group. And just you have to either blow a battle res or you have to like wipe it or you have to do something to reset this boss because you can't have that happen. What I did here is as soon as I got knocked back, I'm going to just I'll play it one more time. Is I'm skull bashing. I'm using skull bash to counter the knockback because skull bash is a 10-yard charge. So I get knocked, I skull bash, and then I'm in place. So a little bit of a flex there. If you're a Guardian Druid looking to really, really min-max your toolkit, there aren't kicks that are required in the first 15 seconds of this fight. Ads don't spawn for the first 15 seconds. So here we are 13 seconds in, ads are spawning. You don't need to kick until about the 17, 18 second mark. You kick range ads. Use Skull Bash as a charge if you ever need to. A way to negate knockbacks. And then right here, another big flex. So this is when I start picking up my game. In the last 1.2 seconds of the cast, Dwarf Shadows is a 1.5 second cast. You start casting Dwarf Shadows, you can avoid the slam. So pretty cool thing there. You can also if there's no other mobs up, you can shift out of bear form, go into cat form, pop dash, pop stampeding roar to just run out of it. But Dwarf Shadows is a nice little flex if you're playing Venthyr. I know Venthyr's a lot more popular of a play now, ever since we've gotten double Lego plus tier set, and the way that they fix the tier set. So if you weren't aware, originally on PTR, the tier set was basically flat damage. It just did, it was a damage modifier based off of mastery. That's it. It didn't scale with anything else. It didn't scale with Ravenous Frenzy. It didn't scale with damage amps. It didn't scale with potions. What they did, they nerfed the damage on PTR. before this patch went live, but then they allowed the tier set to be modified by like external factors. So damage amps, so think like Earn from Sanguine Depths, for example. Ravenous Frenzy, great example. I don't know where I'm going with this tangent, but yeah, honestly, I don't remember where I was going with this. Let me pause the video. Let me see if I can remember. I remember. Venthyr is popular. So if you're playing Venthyr, Dwarf Shadows is a very cool ability to... You're going to see it in a sec as well, how I can skip mobs with it. Dwarf Shadows is awesome. What I like about Dwarf Shadows compared to like a Night Fae Soul Shape is that Soul Shape takes you out of bear form. Dwarf Shadows doesn't. While Night Fae like Flicker is a blink, it's just nice to be able to stay in bear form, because especially when you're in combat and taking damage, getting like shifting out of form is really bad. So the warrior, I forgot what happened here. We were like kind of laughing about it. Is that the warrior stayed in to just do damage and got killed by the big boy clap. I also think that we missed Curse Dispel. Mage should have dispelled herself. I ended up dispelling myself because I was like, all right, Mage has herself, I have myself. The warrior should be out of melee. So I figured it'd be best if I just, you know, dispel myself and keep the group alive. And then the warriors just stayed in and tried to zug, but yeah, whatever. He goes down. We have 2 battle reses. Like we could get him up here, but we don't. So in our heads, we're like, okay, ads are about to spawn, 150k tunnel, like 2 DPS plus healer and tank. We're fine. Like we never know when there is going to be a wipe. There could be a pretty bad wipe on this next pull. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a double. This is a pretty, I don't want to say complicated, but it is really scary to do this next pull. What we're doing is I'm going to be running all the way into boss room, pulling all the trash that's in like near in the boss room, and then coming all the way back out to here. What this does is it allows you to have open space. It also gives you like your 10 target cleave, and it's just very efficient for cooldowns. And the way that this fight is, so like if you look here, the fight was 2 minutes and 40 seconds. By the time we get situated, by the time I get in and out, 1 minute should be back up. 3 minutes should be back up for like Venthyr Boomkins. My Incarn is back up. So we have these really major CDs, and then at some point in the poll, like minute and a half will come up. So with this count specifically, we have Locke has a minute cooldown. Frost Mage has typically infinite cooldown as long as they keep their Icy Veins constantly being reset. Holy Priest, 1 minute cooldowns, 2 minute with PI. PI is typically going to Locke, and then Warrior has a minute and a half cooldowns with CDR. You also get in this pull, so if you kill quickly, you also get CDR on that. So, long-winded way of saying, you typically have big cooldowns at this point, and you want to be as efficient as possible while also making the pull as comfortable as possible. So with that being said, this is how you do the double pull. So what I'm doing is I'm going to the far left side, I'm placing Door of Shadows here, and then that allows you to skip that pull completely. Not gonna lie, I did not know that before this key, is that if I back up, 10 seconds or so, oops. So the way that this happens is there is like this really weird LOS mechanic right here, like this door. This guy can't see me. Gargan is far enough away where they can't see me, and because I'm roaring and moving quick enough, it doesn't register that I'm within range. At least that's what I assume. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if it's a bug. I don't know what happened here. Normally what I do is I Dwarf Shadows in, so I get a head start on the Gargans. I don't want them to get... The Gargans, like melee, are really rough, so if you get meleeed from behind, you'll probably die. So I want to come in here. I'm going to tag just any of the mobs in there. I don't want the relics yet. I'm going to lock gate here, but instead of being able to hit lock gate, I just get gripped by Priest. DPS and healers need to dodge these swirls. You want to keep the mobs centered around the front of the room so they can funnel in. Whoever has aggro needs to LOS on either side of these doors, because you want the mobs to stack. If you're standing in the doorway and then like healer gets threat, they're going to start casting like the Wicked Bolt is going to be casted. The Houndsmasters are just going to start like... The Houndsmasters are going to just start shooting arrows at anyone who's in line of sight. So everyone wants to make sure they're out of the way. Wait for all the swirls to finish casting. This is when I'm popping Incarn, and we're targeting and I'm just planting. And I'll let like kind of the DPS do the rest. So You have to be careful in here. I think there's one Dark Blade and then there's one Obliterator. We can't kick or anything like that. Curse Dispel goes out on the warrior. Make sure you're not getting hit by the Earth Slam. Again, I'm trying to always face the wall, and this is because if melee or range obviously need to be in melee, they're not going to get hit by frontal. Loyal Beast is going to go off. I have Incarn left for a couple seconds. I get one of the Soothes, I think. I pop Barkskin for another mini Incarn, and then as soon as that ends, I am now kiting. Actually, I have Survival Instincts up, and now I'm kiting. So, Master Root goes out. I'm going to drop Ursals if things get closer. Mage has to be super careful here. I'm going to back that up just so you guys can be super aware of what's happening. So, when the tank is kiting, DPS, be aware of where your tank's going. Tanks also let people know where you're going. Dark Blade is right here in front. Mage is in between me and the Dark Blade. And the Dark Blade will cast Deadly Thrust whether it's in melee range or not. So right here, Deadly Thrust starts being casted. Mage sidesteps. This is really close. I mean, good on the Mage for, paying attention. But I've seen just range DPS get clapped because they're not, like, aware that that's a thing. Pull goes down. Guardian Druids are broken on this fight. Again, but you need, to do this pull, you need, like, almost all of your CDs up. Or you need Lust if you have it. Right here, we have, like, a interesting moment where we're like, all right, Vi or The reason why we would kill Vi here is because we're going to get on the boss, and most of our classes have pretty quick cooldowns. But because we just blew big cooldowns on the last pull, we decided to go for Vi is also a strategy here. It's a fine strategy. Vi, it gives you haste. You don't have Lust for this boss. On high Tyrannical weeks, it can kind of be a slog, but honestly, like, this boss is kind of just glorified trash. So I wouldn't ever really get Vi. There have been runs in like 20s and stuff where we get Vi on this pull going in, but it's if people have cooldowns up already and people need haste to make their class feel better. So is always going to be the play though. If you don't, never mind. So we grab double Stoneborn. Only reason you're going to see me pop off here is because of the Stoneborns. They're doing probably about 80% of my damage right now. And then I'm probably going to sit on Incarn for most of this fight. The reason I'm sitting on Incarn is because we're going to do the next room normally. Fortified weeks, after this boss, the next room, it's very difficult to one-phase him. There was a strategy last year and also with Prideful where you would just like one-phase the guy and then be done with it. Now with like tier sets and with like certain classes just having crazy AoE, it's more efficient to just two-cycle him. And then what the two-cycle means is that you go in, he'll do his communion, and then you just try to blow up as many little yellow ads as possible. So that's a one cycle. If you kill all of them before he does another cast, that's a one cycle. A two cycle would be he does a second communion. It's typically like 30-40 seconds in. And then after he does the second communion, you finish off all of the remaining yellow ads. You want all of them to die. So two cycling is probably the safest thing to do. If you three cycle, your group has no damage or you have deaths or something like that. The one cycle is really efficient, but like it's very, very difficult to do that, to kill all of the little ads before he does it again. It would only be if you had like a boomkin with Ravenous Frenzy and CA up. So this boss is not difficult. If you struggle with this boss, have a kick rotation. You need 3 kicks in between AoE. You typically need 2 melee and a range kick. Most groups should have that. Or you'll need to do like melee range, then it's like tank range, and you just rotate between range. So Incarn's being popped here. I think I hit like 60 or 70k. I don't remember. And then you want to try to focus Most of your DPS want to try to clear the back of the room, unless they're like the Frost Mage, for example, is going to get a lot of funnel from also hitting the boss. Like the boss is just one extra target for Icy Vein resets. So with Incarn alone, I'm able to clear most of the front of the room. I hit, it looks like 84k there was the most that I saw. It might have been a little higher. So this is so far the one cycle. Dodger, this is the second cycle. So this is second communion. It's happening 40 seconds in. And then if there's any yellow ads up, finish them off. Kick the boss, stack these guys up. They fixate. So if you're a melee DPS and you're like wondering why shit's hitting you and you think that your tank's bad, they're not. These mobs fixate on DPS players and healers for a certain portion of time. Just make sure you stack, because then it's efficient cleave. And then that's pretty much the dungeon. Inquisitor Cigar at this point is just like a training dummy. Dark Communion doesn't do a cast. You can kick Wicked Bolts if you want. On higher Fortified, you definitely want to kick Wicked Bolts. But in like this level of a key, at this point with my gear, I just felt comfortable if we weren't getting kicks. So, anything else about this key that I can like point out? So the Guardian Druid nerfs, I know some people were concerned with them. A lot of, okay, so like the pre-nerf, most of the complaints that I heard were from DPS players saying like, oh, it's so broken, it's really powerful, it should be nerfed, it's like stupid for a tank to be doing as much damage as a DPS. And I get that, and my counter argument is that there's a lot of threat issues that are happening with tanks right now, mostly Guardian Druids and like blood DKs without 4-set. Like if you look at the tank without sets, without double Legos, there's a handful of tanks that have a very massive threat issue. And I think Blizzard needs to address that without just like turbo buffing abilities. They need to actually just fix the threat modifiers. And so the nerf to the tier set, it was probably needed. Like capping it was good. I honestly suspect that the reason that they're capping the damage was because of MDI coming up. Because it was uncapped on PTR for months and months and months. It was broken on PTR for months. They nerfed the damage, but then allowed modifiers to affect it. And then they just, like, it was tested. It went through lots of testing. A lot of people were playing Guardian Druid on PTR, myself included. I was, submitting bug reports and seeing, I was messing around with it a lot. So I don't think it was because in their blue post, I think they were like, it wasn't intended the way that, like, how we saw it happening. Like, they just were doing way more damage than we expected. I was like, man, I was submitting reports that I was doing like 250k damage as a Venthyr Guardian Druid. There's no way that they didn't see it. But the problem is in an MDI setting, the keys are lower than this. Eventually they get up to 21s, but like some of the qualifying rounds are like 16s, 17s, 18s. A Guardian Druid can fucking solo a 17, let alone like you bring some DPS who can do some ridiculous burst. A Guardian Druid was going to be just like that tank that you brought to everything. So I think them nerfing it was to hope to bring the MDI a little bit more in line. That's my like crazy theory behind it. The nerf was big. After running keys this current week, which is again a week after this recording, the nerf's not that big. It's only about 15% nerf to the tier set in larger pulls. But if you're pulling smaller, especially like this week now, it's like necrotic, you're not going to feel the nerf at all if you have 4-set. So it sucked, but they honestly, Blizzard just needs to fix the threat issues. One thing about this boss, I should probably back up and just mention it, is about double soaking. So the boss phase at 70 and at 40, this is when he sucks in all the statues. If you see my positioning here, what I'm going to do is the statues come in. I'm going to back out just a little bit. Sometimes I'm confident and I try to greed a little bit extra damage. You move in between two statues. And then if you go as close to his hitbox as possible, without being like inside or moving past his hitbox, you can soak two of the pillars instead of just one, which the dot doesn't stack. So what this means is that if you're double soaking, you're essentially removing one dot entirely. I hope I'm not wrong about this, because I've always seen like DPS double soak as well, and it never feels like it does more damage, like as if they're soaking two beams and taking both the damages. So if your group is, intelligent, or you want to try to minimize group damage, especially on high tyrannical weeks, have classes double soak. The tank can typically double soak without a major CD, and then a DPS should double soak but use a major CD. So things like cloak, ice block, dispersion. Just trying to think of like some general cooldowns. Cloak is really powerful. Turtle, it's pretty easy. And then the boss will always port, if you like see these tiles, to the very, very center. So you can use actually these lines as like a reference point on how close you can stand to him. So I put down the marker saying like, hey, I'm soaking the star side. So you guys need to be on this side. And what this will do is it'll double soak. You can see that the mage and the priest backed me up. The reason for this is just in case I accidentally get bumped. This is a practice that we do on storming weeks, because storming will spawn underneath the boss, and if I get knocked, the double soak then gets removed and it'll start channeling. So that's why they're here. It's a good practice. It's what my group is used to doing. 2 people back up behind the tank in case I need to move, and then DPS either split, or if a DPS is super confident, they double soak. But even on Fortified, you can see how much that damage was doing split. So if you're able to double soak, it removes a lot of that extra damage. And then if you commit a major cooldown as a DPS player, your healer can just focus on continuing to do damage and just like light spot healing. And that's pretty much it. This fight, dodge statues, dodge frontal. Whenever the debuff comes out on the tank, use something. If you're low on health, I mean, okay, so like if you know you're gonna get low on health, use like survival instincts. For the most part though, like you can double frenzied regen, and then you'll get recovery for it again once you get the debuff. I forgot what the debuff, Stigma of Pride, I think. Yeah. One thing I hate at the end of this key, I always have Stigma at the end, and I always like bleed out towards the end of a key. This time I didn't, but normally I do. But yeah, that's it. That's the whole run. This is a pretty aggressive route. If I don't have it in my Discord already, I'm gonna put this route in my Discord. If you feel free to join if you'd like. Again, big shout out to Arturos. I think I'm saying that properly. Maybe. Thank you for just reaching out and asking to see this route. I didn't plan on doing this video right away because this was like a Monday night last minute key. I don't like getting carried by 4 sets. I want to have like runs that are semi impressive. You know, 21 I would say is good, but yeah. Thanks for asking for that. So if you guys also like join my Discord and have any like questions or recommendations, or like want to see anything specifically that I do, like I'd be more than happy to kind of hear your guys' thoughts, and then that gives me like ideas or what I should prioritize video wise. So because sometimes I get lost in the sauce and I'm like, I have like 8 videos on my plate and I kind of work on them all at the same time, and then I don't know which one to prioritize. So anyways, I hope you guys learned something. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if I messed up in my either things that anything about trash that I like have wrong. Let me know, because I want to know everything I can about keys. And let me know if you have any suggestions how I can update my route to make it even better. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys are staying happy, healthy, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.